Hi, this is Chris. In this video, I wanted to talk about some of the sort of paving history of US Highway 80. I know that sounds a little dry, but there's some places in the backcountry that people often see with different generations of the concrete and asphalt pavings on US 80 that people probably look at and realize, oh, there's the old highway, but don't really know when that dates from. So in this video, what I want to do is kind of go over the generations of the predecessor to Highway 80 and then also US 80 itself, and sort of talk about when sections were paved and how they were paved, because it's kind of interesting, and it's what we see when we go out and see different little bypassed or cut off pieces out in the backcountry. So that's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to look at some historic photos first, some photos and postcards, and then we'll do show some video out in the field of what some of these places actually look like.
So before we start building our highway, we should talk about January 1916. Two huge storms came across Southern California in January of 16 and resulted in the loss of pretty much every road in the backcountry. This is the railroad over by the coast here. When the roads were rebuilt, which had pretty much been wagon roads, they were rebuilt as automobile roads, which meant usually less gradient, a lot less mud, and just designed more for the early automobiles at the time. So the floods of January 1916 resulted in most of the rebuilds that we're going to see. So as the roads were rebuilt after the January 16 floods, we start seeing the early version of the automobile roads. Here's a little Model T or something similar sitting over there. This is heading down into Pine Valley. You can see a nice graded road curving down the slopes. This is Mountain Springs grade, obviously right up to the top of the grade. Very similar road, dirt road, fairly well graded in most places, not necessarily in all of them though. And then down at the bottom of Mountain Springs grade, this is Shepherd's Bridge, which I'm probably going to do a whole video just on this bridge. You can see the dirt road leading up to it. At this point, after 1916, there was actually pavement, concrete pavement going out into the desert. But in this photograph, the same bridge, notice the road on the left there leading to the bridge. That's anything but a major highway, but at this time it was actually state highway, so pretty sandy and bumpy, even though it was a state highway at that time. So as we get into the 19-teens, we start getting some paving in certain areas. I'll talk more about where as we get into the field videos. This is the early, I call it the single lane concrete. Fairly narrow compared to the later road. This is out by Acumba. Part of this is still here. I'll show you some video of it coming up here. But this was put in between 1916 and about 1919 is when the very first concrete goes in, but only in certain areas. Downtown Acumba, you can see that single lane of concrete leading away from us right down at the bottom of the photo where it says Imperial Avenue. That's written over the top of a very narrow single band of concrete. But most of the mountain crossing, this is Pine Valley looking east, most of the mountain crossing would stay graded all the way up until about 1930, 31, 32, along in there. I love the California US 80 sign with the graded dirt road leading away from it here. And here we see the area just above Viejas Valley. The freeway, Interstate 8, cuts right through this whole thing now. You can see the later road with the truck on over there on the right, and then the earlier road would be 1917 road cut through the hill there to the left. So even in these later years, there were still a lot of pieces of the earlier highway that was still visible. So a really good example of the generations of the highway can be seen in these photographs of Pine Valley. Here we have the 1917 bridge over Pine Creek with dirt road leading down to it and away from it. That would be replaced in 1931 or 32. Here in Pine Valley again, this is 1928. Some women standing in a road here. That car coming in from the right edge over there is kicking up a big cloud of dust because it's coming along the road that's still dirt in 1928. Would be for another couple of years. And then this trio of photos really shows the generations of the road. We have a little automobile coming between what they call the Twin Pines of Pine Valley on a road that's obviously still the wagon road. And we're going to keep an eye on that tree on the right. The one on the left is doomed, but the one on the right we're going to see in the next photograph. So here we are probably in the late 1920s, same tree, but you can see the road has gotten quite a bit wider, took out the Twin Pine on the left, and but it's still a dirt road coming through Pine Valley, and that was the way it would stay up until early 1930s. And then in our next image, we're going to see the same as Pine Valley Inn on the right. There it is over there again, same tree, in there. But then we have what's sort of the last version of Highway 80 leading through Pine Valley. So very interesting little trio there showing the progression through the years, through the Twin Pines and then the single pine of Pine Valley. So before we get going on our highway construction here, I thought I would show you what the piece of the old wagon road looks like. This is the kind of road that would have been washed out in 1916 and different creek crossings and things that would then get rebuilt as the early automobile road. So this is near Pine Valley, heading toward Guatai, and this is what a section of the old wagon freight road looks like. This is when it came up from El Cajon through Descanso, Pine Valley, and then on out toward Acumba and down into the desert. So you can see it's actually a pretty decent road, width and construction. Generally has a little rock wall on the edge and everything, but this is what the automobile roads were replacing by the mid-19 teens. So leaving the wagon roads behind, let's talk about the first concrete paving of what would become Highway 80. This is that 1916 to 19 concrete paving. I call it the single lane paving, although it's actually a little wider than that. It's easy to recognize because it's one big single pour for the most part. There's no expansion joints in it that we'll see in the later concrete. There's no expansion joint down the middle of it, so there's nothing delineating into panels that we see on the other highway. It must have been incredibly smooth when it first went in because it was this nice, smooth, continuous strip of concrete. Every once in a while there's an expansion joint in it, but they're pretty rare. I think it was probably like where they ran out of concrete for the day, where they stopped paving for the day when they were building it, and that's where they put in a joint then where they resumed later on. This is out by Desert Tower, leading down toward Desert Tower. There's a strip of the old concrete along here. This highway was segmented. It went from the early paving in 1916, went from El Cajon up to Viejas Valley, where the paving stopped. You then had graded road all the way over the mountains until you got down to Boulevard, where Highway 94 came in. At Boulevard, this concrete started again and went to the very top of Mountain Springs grade, and there it ended again. And then when you get to the bottom of Mountain Springs grade, in 1916 they built what was called Shepherd's Bridge, and the concrete resumed down there heading out into the desert. So you basically had three pieces. You had west of Viejas, you had Boulevard to Mountain Springs grade, and then you had down in the desert. Mountain Springs grade was still dirt, and so was the main crossing Descanso Pine Valley area, as we saw in those postcards. So this is just walking along the early concrete out here. There's lots of little pieces of this between Boulevard and Acumba off to the sides of the later Highway 80. So I'm actually walking up to a little washed out bridge here across the creek. You can see the later highway of 1932 over there on the left. That's the current driveway to Desert View Tower. But our earlier road down here is washed out, and this area gives us a good area that we can look at how this road was actually built back in 1919. So if we get down along the edge of the road here, we can see that it's actually a pretty thick slab of concrete. I think its main downfall was that it didn't have any kind of expansion joints in it, and it tended to crack quite a bit. What looks like expansion joints usually are actually just big cracks running across the concrete. Like I said, it probably was really nice and smooth to begin with, but there's a reason they put little gaps in there every 10 or 12 feet is to keep them from cracking. This washed out at some point, little bridge in here. But if we get up close to it here, we can see it's really quite thick. Has a lot of gravel in it, not just little tiny gravel either, but actually like big chunks of rock in there. That's not something you'd really see in later mixes of concrete either. I'm not sure that adds much to the strength, but so if I hold my hand up against it here, you can see it's actually probably a good 6 inches thick of concrete in there. Must have been quite a project to haul all that concrete out to the backcountry in 1916 to 19 to pour that highway. And then looking back across at our little washed out bridge here, you see the early road, and then there's the later road that replaced it that has a big 1932 stamp in it, so we know when that was built. Much wider, and that's the segmented concrete that we're more familiar with every place else in the mountains. So, but this area is a really nice little remnant of both roads right next to each other out here just to the west of Desert View Tower. And actually over near Boulevard, there's a section of the early single-lane concrete that you can still drive. It's a little loop that comes off the later highway. There was a lodge back here called Mistletoe Lodge back in the 1920s. There's a couple little buildings left of it, but this little loop comes off the highway. You can still drive the what out in this area is about 1919 concrete. And then a little bit further along the loop here, we can see what's left of the old Mistletoe Lodge complex. There's at least one old building, rock building there back in the trees. And this is going to lead over to the main Highway 80 again. So let's jump back over by Desert View Tower again to look at the next generation and sort of the last one of the paving on Highway 80. This is that here it's 1932 paving. Happened between about 1930 and 32 or 33. This is what we still drive over much of the mountain crossing. This is segmented concrete, quite a bit wider than that earlier single lane. This is regular 2-lane road. Segmented every, maybe 12, 15 feet. With a segment right down the middle as well. So these are big panels of concrete. And of course, this was what results in the clippity-clop sound that we know so well as we drive old Highway 80 across the mountains today. So a great amount of this remains. Some of it's covered with asphalt in some areas, but the concrete's usually still underneath it. So this is quite common paving. So to finish out our look at the 1930s paving, let's head over here by Descanso. This is that abandoned piece of highway that everybody takes pictures of by Descanso, and several good date stamps along here. All of the 1930 to 32, 33 concrete has these date stamps, usually wherever they stopped paving and started paving for the day when they were working on it. So you can see that was November 1930, but then just a short distance away, there's another date stamp over here, and it is end of January 1931. So even in the same area, it took them 2 months just to pave the other lane of the highway. So they were probably paving a long stretch of one lane and then came back and finished the other half of the road a couple of months later. So I hope you enjoyed this little video about the paving history of Highway 80 from its early dirt days to the later final pavings in the 1930s. Hope you enjoyed the video, and hope you subscribe so that you can keep informed of future videos that I want to do on Highway 80 as well, taking a real detailed look at some of the places along the highway, both the highway itself, some bridges and such, and then also some of the communities and things along the road. So stay tuned for more videos on US Highway 80, and thanks for watching.